Hello everyone, Dustin here again on the channel Steeplehead Studios. We're going to continue our series where we walk through the book of Hail Caesar. Today we're going to be looking at formations. So I'm just going to get right into that. Let's open it up and I will explain how the formations work in the rule book. So, in Hail Caesar you're going to have basic formations. Now, there's basically two kinds of formations all units are going to adhere to. You're going to either have formed formations. Formed formations are something like this, where they're all in like a line or they're close up next to each other. The other kind of formation would be open order, in this case skirmishers, which are just spread out amongst each other. Those are the two most basic formations. There are some exceptions and some rules in the game. For example, elephants. They're not really a battle line, they are a single unit, a single model, but they still follow battle formations. We just don't, when we get to elephants later on, we'll discuss it, but something like an elephant doesn't really have a battle line or a formed formation. These guys here are in a formation which is basically the battle line. Okay, the battle line is exactly what you think of it. It's rank and file soldiers in a wide formation that are ready to meet or attack another battle line of soldiers. It will be 2 ranks or more, and it will look something like this for the standard unit, just like this. Pretty standard stuff, right? For the elephant, he's just one model, so he's always in the battle line, essentially. He can adopt some other formation, we'll talk about that soon. Obviously, skirmishers here in open order, they cannot form a battle line. They are just open order, and we'll talk about that soon. But typically, your chariots, your cavalry, your infantry, they're all going to be set up in the rank and file formation to meet the other enemies in a rank and file formation. And that is the most basic, simple, you will use the most often kind of formation. And again, it doesn't matter on the depth, like I said before. But typically what people have done and what I've seen is that the elephant is just one model. He's just going to be the elephant, so his battle line and his depth is always the same. Chariots are typically just the one models, and I think for our games we've always had 3 light chariots in a unit, so they're just one formation. And then artillery, there's no, there's not another catapult behind one catapult. They're just one depth. You don't have to, you don't have to put like 4 catapults. 2 behind another 2 or anything like that. Typically something like this for the infantry and cavalry are fine, where single model 1 depth is good in battle line and for battle line when you are doing other units. Okay, here's another formation you'll probably see in game. What have I done here? I've turned them all. They're all now facing this way. This is what we're going to call a column. And this will come up in some of your games. It's rarely come up in ours, but you may want to make use of it. Basically, a column is a formation that has a bunch of troops moving in a way that they're marching along quickly to get to a certain point, okay? So they're no longer in a battle line like these guys. They want to get somewhere in a hurry, so they all form up in a column and follow each other. We'll talk about the advantages you get from a column later. But so for infantry, depending on the size and what kind of frontages you're using, for infantry the columns are going to be between 2 and 4 models wide. In this case it makes sense to just do 40 millimeters. And for other types of infantry it's going to, or rather for other types of soldiers it's going to vary. Like for the elephants can adopt a column. They can't really represent that because it's just one model. So units that only use like a model, or that's all they have for the depth, they can still form a column, but they're going to have to be at least 1 or 2 models wide. Columns are useful, but you will lose some attacking if you are attacked in a column, and we'll discuss that later on. And you might wonder, if you're playing like a massive game like this, there's a big open space, why bother being in a column? Just slowly go towards the enemy and kill it. Columns are useful if you're in a area with lots of terrain. These trees might be hard to go through, and my guys might not all fit. If they're in a battle line and it's really big, I might not be able to fit through that space. But if I form up into a column, oh look at me, I can march right through there. So depending on the game you're playing and the type of terrain you got, columns can be very useful. I just haven't had enough enclosed terrain to really make use of it yet. So For infantry, you have to have more ranks than you have files. So in this case, you can see there's a whole bunch of ranks, where normally the battle line would just be 2 ranks. So you're always going to have 2 to 4 guys across minimum. In this case, I can just do 2, and they're set up in a way that has more ranks than they do files. So another basic formation in this game is the open order formation. Typically, you're going to see skirmishers and horse archers in this kind of formation. Other units can adopt them, and I'll get to that in a moment. But for skirmishers and horse archers, the only formations they can ever adopt in the game are open order and column. They cannot take any other sort of formation. However, they're not the only forces that can adopt open order. Light chariots, light cavalry, and light infantry can also become open order and be spaced like these fine fellows are here. So if these histati here, let's say they're light troops just for this formation's purposes, they could be in a battle line, but then when you're playing you could order them to say, okay, you're light infantry, I don't want you in a battle line anymore, break it to an open formation. This is where it's, I think, convenient to have your light troops on individual basis. But they could break into an open order formation like so. So yeah, light troops, light infantry, light cavalry, and light chariots can break into open order, and skirmishers and horse archers will typically always be in open order. So open order units, they always have to be within an inch of each other and no more. So you'll have to have them within an inch if they're in open order. There are some exceptions to the rule of open order. Normally heavy infantry cannot break into open order, but sometimes in game when you're playing, say your guys are marching along here, we'll just put them over here. Say they're marching along and they want to go through these woods. Okay, I'm at the woods. They, in this situation, can break into open order to get through the woods. As soon as they get out of the woods, they're going back into their previous formation, which is probably the battle line or column, whatever it was. So just for moving through woods or rivers or other types of terrain, we'll go over terrain later on, the heavy infantry or medium infantry can adopt open order, but as soon as they get out of that terrain, they go right back into their battle line. Alright? Units like elephants and heavy chariots, artillery, they cannot adopt open order, so they'll always have their formation, which is basically column or battle line. It should be said then that units like elephants, if they're going through like an impassable wood, they really can't get through there, can they? You'd have to, we'll talk about terrain later, but they can't adopt an open order to go through really thick woods. They'd have to go around it. Same with heavy chariots as well. Artillery will also have some difficulty through the woods. So I bunched all these guys up together here. I don't really have any pikemen to represent this next part, but another formation you'll come across, especially if you're playing with Hellenistic armies, is the pike phalanx. Now, pikemen in Hail Caesar, and I'll just show you the rulebook's picture here, they always have to have a minimum of 4 ranks, okay? They cannot be less. You cannot have 2, you cannot have 3. This is because pikemen, in historical sense, were set up in real deep divisions. That's the explanation the rulebook gives you. However, pikes in game also give you some considerable advantages over tons of units. Like some units can't charge them dead on, they cancel out people's charge bonuses. We'll look at that later. But yeah, the pike phalanx simply cannot be fielded in anything less than 4 ranks. Likewise, and I'll show you over here, warbands, especially the Celtic warbands, anything that's a warband in the game is also going to be in a minimum of 4 ranks. So, in the case of, say, these fellows here, if my frontage here is 160, the frontage won't matter, it doesn't really matter, okay. So in this situation here, why did I bunch them up? I just wanted to give you the idea that your warband is going to be roughly, if you're doing 160 millimeters, it's going to be like this, and you're going to have 4 lines of guys, or at least 4 bases of guys behind it. Like I said, you don't have to put 4 guys a base, but the bases should go in a way that represent 4 ranks. And that's only for warbands and pike phalanx. I should mention, in case someone gets confused, light infantry warbands are also 4 ranks. they cannot adopt open order. Warbands are simply either the battle line or a column. I'm not entirely sure on this, but I don't think the warbands can adopt any other formations. So it doesn't say in the book if they can form a column or not, so I'll leave that to whoever plays the game to decide if warbands can adopt columns. Another kind of formation we talk about in Hail Caesar is the square. And you see I've got these hastati, these heavy troops, in sort of a square formation. It doesn't have to be a perfect square, but it has to kind of be as close as you can to one. If I had an extra guy in the unit, I'd probably put one in the middle to represent the leader giving orders. But yeah, a square typically looks like this. The only guys that can make a square are light infantry, medium infantry, and the heavy infantry. Skirmishers cannot make a square, as I said before. They can only take the open order and the column formation. So yeah, this is just a formation restricted only to light, medium, and heavy infantry. So the point of a square is to basically give your unit fronts all the way around. So you can't be flanked and you cannot be rear charged. This will hinder the fighting availability and the amounts of dice you can roll when you're fighting like this. But in some scenarios, if you're surrounded and you've got heavily armored troops, you might be able to fend off or at least hold some light infantry for a while, or something else you're fighting. So don't overlook the square if you play. There may be some situations where you need to use it. Finally, you're going to have Roman-specific formations like Testudo, Pig's Head, and the Wedge. I won't get too much into that if you play Romans. You can check it out yourself. But those are pretty specific formations only for the Imperial Romans. And possibly the Marian Romans in the late Republic. When you're playing, you will have to give orders to change formations. I won't get too much into orders now because that's not part of the first section here. But typically what you're going to do is that you're going to change a formation. You're going to have to change it in a way where the leader matches. This is another point where I guess the leader matters in the game. But if you're changing a formation, there's different areas that the leader should sit or move to when you're moving a formation. So for the case of columns, if this guy here is my leader, what you're supposed to do, you want to put him in a column, you turn the way that you want him to face, and then you line him up in a column behind him. So you basically turn the leader the way he wants to go, and the rest of the fellows line up right behind him whatever way the leader faces. For changing into open order, it's fairly straightforward. You're going to have a leader model, let's say him. He's going to be kind of your middle of an open order formation. And you just arrange the fellows all within an inch in a way that makes them look like open order. And the leader here still sticks in the middle. And when you move them back, the leader here is going to be in the middle again. You want to move them back in a way where the leader is still going to end up being in the middle. So leader models in this regard for formations are important because they do set out where you want your different files or column to be. Now remember, it's only light infantry that can form the open order unless you're going through trees or something. And skirmishers don't really need a leader model because they're always an open order or a column, so you don't need a leader for skirmishers, I personally think. And then what I just did there could also be used for cavalry. We'll talk about a rule later on, but in the game, normally these formation changes count as one movement. However, light infantry and light cavalry can move once. That's like they can actually move a distance and still break into an open order formation. But we'll look at that later on. And finally, for the square, the book says there's two methods of lining them up. The first one could be, they could be in like a battle line like so. And what happens is that they all kind of filter around this leader. So they'd all go in a method where the leader's still in the center. I'll turn these guys around. And you can see there, after I moved them there, that he kind of got the leader in the middle. And this is a messy square here. But this square would have gone where two guys have kind of advanced in the front in this unit situation, and then you get a bunch of guys going in the back. That's one way to set up the square. Honestly, in Hail Caesar, it's not really picky as long as you don't like make the square way up here. Like if you're just doing like one rank in front of it and make the square, it's fine. And again, to break back out of the square, you move all the guys in the formation that they were in. The other way to do the square is to have your battle line and have all your, how you can have your leader in the front and they could all just form, let's put them back in battle line. Say they're in battle line, they could form back this way. I don't have enough models to really represent a good square, but you can either basically form the square around the leader, or the leader could be part of the front of the square or wherever he was, and all the models just kind of form me as close as you can to a square behind him like that. The rules here give you 2 diagrams to follow. You can check them out yourself and figure them out. Both are legit ways to make a square. And it should be said for tiny units, they don't really have formations. They've got a couple guys in them. So they're very restricted when it comes to units and formations. I will not get into tiny units. You can read that for yourself. The last thing I want to go over here before I end this video is the basic quadrants of a rank and file unit. Every unit's going to have, I'll push these guys out of the way and this tree here. You're going to have flanks, a front, and a rear. And it's pretty basic. The front's going to be here. You got 2 flanks left and right on either side, and then you've got the rear. How they set it up is basically from the corner of the unit out like so. So if I had some way to measure it, I guess, it would look something like so. Okay, so here would be one of the flanks. And all the lines kind of extend from the corner of the units out like so. Those are the different quadrants, and those matter later on when we go through more of the rules, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, all units have a front flank and a rear, which will affect your gameplay when you meet it in charging and shooting and lots of things. Okay, and to end this video, the last part of this chapter goes on to another part about divisions. Like I said before, divisions can have any type of soldier you want, as many or as less units as you want. Here I put them all in one massive division. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units here. Mostly some small units, an elephant, and a skirmish group there. And it's ideal in this game to keep your units in one division all within 6 inches of each other. There are divisional orders, which we'll talk about some other time, that you can give to units, and you can order all of them to do something that are within 6 inches of each other. So you can essentially say, if you're playing the game and you want to send these guys off on a crazy quest on their own, you can separate them from the group. However, if he's not within 6 inches of another unit, and he's not close enough to the general or commander's order, then he cannot be part of a divisional order. And divisional orders are a quick, fast way to get the game going. I won't get into it. So most people like to keep their units in cohesion and keep them within 6 inches of each other. I often send skirmishers out on suicide missions. Or horse archers don't need to be nearby, but we'll get more into that later on with the rules. The commander of a division has to always be within a move's distance of one of their units in their division. I guess that's protection, but commanders have quite an amount of movement. They go 24 inches. The book doesn't really state if it's a unit's movement or the commander's movement, and I think it's the commanders. They get a massive amount of movement, so as long as you're within like 6 to 12 inches of one of your division's units, the commander should be fine, I think. And in this game, the commanders usually are not at risk. They cannot be shot at when they're out giving orders like so. It's very rare that an enemy collects them, and it's because they can move a lot, and we'll go over that later on. So commanders in the way on their own there are quite safe. You never have to worry about them really dying. They can die if they join a fight, or in some scenarios they get shot at, but we'll go over that later. They're usually pretty safe from before combat if they haven't joined. That was the formations, and I hope you can understand better how formations and the different setups of the armies now work. In the next video we're going to get into more gameplay, and that'll be part 3, so stay tuned for that. If you like the context on this video, please like and subscribe, and I will continue this series. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.